year you weren't really expecting this bug to be such a problem, and all of a sudden it is? Does that happen?
Absolutely. Things, you know, they have the capability to be around,
Mm-hmm.
or they might be in the background, um, and you can kind of ignore them, and then all of a sudden you see symptoms on a plant that, uh-oh, we
Mm-hmm.
have to look at this closer, and then you find out that, oh, we have a spider mite issue, or
Uh-huh.
we have Japanese beetles. And a lot of times we don't see these insects flying around. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, aphids and mites, you're not going to just see them buzzing by like a bee. They're going to be on a plant and feeding on that plant and causing damage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the damage, the plant not looking right, that catches our eye, and
Yeah.
then we look closer, and then, oh man, and then the spider mites are on that cucumber plant, or
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Our cucumbers went quick this year. They were really, really looking great, and just seemed like overnight cucumbers said, "We're done. We're out of here. Goodbye."
yeah,
And we had no idea why. Um,
and it could have been something like mites,
mm-hmm.
because they'll go unnoticed for quite a while, and then you start to see the color of the plant looking not as nice and green as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
The color, the green color, just fades out of it, and it starts to take on a more bronze, or lighter green,
Mm-hmm.
and then the leaves will turn brown eventually. You might get a little bit of yellowing in there, and then if you look close, you can see webbing, really fine webbing can be on the plant.
Uh-huh.
They'll attack the leaves first, but then they can attack the cucumbers,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll do the same thing because they suck sap out of the plant. So they'll stick their mouth parts in and remove uh, sap
Uh-huh.
from the plant, and all that piercing. There's just multiple pierce places on there. Then even the color, the chlorophyll color of the cucumber itself will start to fade away as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily make it unedible. You can still eat it. You can still peel it and eat it.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt anything. But that feeding, and then they can also transmit some viruses and things to plants. Cucumbers have been bred. Some of them are very susceptible to viruses. Others have some resistance to it.
Mm-hmm.
But those types of insects, aphids, mites, can feed on broadleafed weeds, pick up viruses that are being harbored and supported in those plants. Then when they move to our desirable plants, then as part of that feeding, and causing that damage, they can also transmit these viruses that will then can cause the whole plant just to collapse and be gone.
Well, one of the things that we get quite often here is folks will call and they say, "There's something going on with this plant," and you'll say, "You need to check for this or for that, and here's how you do it." Um, is that something that we should be doing before we notice damage
Yes,
anyway?
yes. Scouting,
Mm-hmm.
just being observant, looking at your plants occasionally. That goes a long way to helping to prevent or to minimize damage. With a lot of insects, we can have some feeding on there and have some damage and still get a good crop, still be able to take care of the situation. We tend to run into more issues on the disease side of the equation,
Mm-hmm.
where once that disease is there, oftentimes it causes a rot, uh, especially on fruits and vegetables. So peaches, right now, we're in peach season,
Yeah.
but brown rot of peach is extremely common, happens every year. We just kind of sit and wait for it to happen.
Uh-huh.
And you can have those, you can pick the peaches, they look fine. You let them set for a couple days, and all of a sudden, half of it's brown, and then it gets fuzzy, and then it rots. But that's the brown rot fungus, which we have to prevent. So we would have to be working on that and treating for that preventatively
Mm-hmm.
as that peach develops along the way, so that when we get to harvest, the fungus isn't there,
Uh-huh.
and we'll be able to have a good peach that we can eat.
So with a lot of them, and particularly fruit crops, when you notice the damage, it's a little bit late.
Grapes, black rot on grapes,
Mm-hmm.
extremely common every year. It overwinters here. It'll overwinter, the spores will overwinter on the vines. So I just had somebody ask me about that the other day. But yeah, even though we've been fairly dry, we've had fairly reasonable weather, we've still had enough wetting periods that black rot fungus, which can overwinter on the vines, and even with proper pruning and everything, we can minimize it, but we can still have some overwinter on there, and then that becomes the beginning of maybe small infections. But you'll get little tiny black dots, and they can be on every grape in a cluster. And then about this time, then you'll start to see maybe half that grape turn brown, a tan or a light brown, and then it'll just turn black, and it'll shrivel up like a raisin. And every grape on that cluster will do that. So that's another disease that once we really kind of see it, it's almost too late to deal with it at that point. Tar spot on maple, that's also kind of come out of nowhere. We always have a little bit of it around, but especially Norway maple are susceptible to that. Already had several calls about that just in the last week or two. But you will get these about the size of a dime spots on the maple leaves. They'll be a lighter green, then they'll turn brown, and then they'll just turn tar black with the fungus, the structure that's on there. And that's when you really tend to notice it. You can miss it earlier on when it's just these almost lime green spots. It's when they turn black. And then when the leaves start to drop off the tree, that's when people, oh no, my leaves are falling off my tree.
I said to my wife the other day, I said the leaves are starting to brown up, and now we're seeing them laying in the yard underneath the maple trees already, and it's still July.
Yeah, and so if you look at those leaves, you might find those black spots, and they can be the size of a dime or even a nickel size spots. They're larger spots in many cases, and you can have multiples of those on there, and then the leaf drops. And in most cases, we just had the right conditions at the right time this spring, that those spores were released, infections happened, and now we're getting leaf drop.
It's not like you're going to go out with your little spray bottle and
No,
spray a 120-foot tree.
And it's usually, the trees rarely ever succumb to that particular fungus infection, so we typically don't do anything for it. If you had some highly prized Norway maple, which most people don't, you might try to protect that if you ran into a problem with it.
So that's a rare one? The Norway maple is a rare one, huh?
No, well, no, I said a rare specimen of Norway maple. Because
I had no idea.
It can be on the noxious tree list, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Norway maple, yeah. And it's a non-native species as well. There's a couple other species of that tar spot fungus which can attack silver maple and red maple, which are native maples. But we usually don't see that get to infections at the extent level that we see on Norway maple.
People really love their red maples, don't they? That's a nice tree.
It is. It is. There's a lot of different cultivars, a little bit different shapes, sizes. But yeah, red maples.
And you can they grow to a much smaller height than
they're not as usually as big a stature as some of the maples.
We love ours. Our red maple. That's a thumbs up. We got a winner in that one.
There you go. Yeah. That's
all right.
Good.
So all of these things are issues that you need to take note of, and you've got something to share.
Yeah.
What?
Our clock's not here.
No.
But anyhow.
Not that you ever pay attention to it anyway, but go.
Oh, I know you're going to cue, and we're going to go when we need to go. So thinking about pests that we might miss, leaf hoppers are an example. So maybe you mowing. Maybe you have a field that you mow, and you might only mow it once or twice a year. Leaf hoppers are a great example of one that might be feeding there, or they'll be on grain crops that are getting harvested now. So wheat and barley, and rye, those grain crops. So they can be hanging around that, and then when those crops are harvested, then all of a sudden those insects are going to move somewhere.
Yeah.
They're not going to just die there. They're going to move off and try to infect something else. So sometimes we can see some infestations that weren't there, and all of a sudden you mow a old weedy field, or you mow hay, or you mow these grain or harvest these grain crops, and then all of a sudden pests move in and can infect the crop that you're trying to grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just another example of getting caught off guard sometimes.
Very good. Thank you, sir. This
You're
has
welcome.
been very informative. We enjoy your participation in the program and watching you try to cross the traffic.
Yeah.
It's always a good thing.
As long as I make it each time.
He's Bob Pollock from the Extension Service. You have a